Hi, everyone. We're here today to discuss how to get into screenwriting and hear from our very experienced writers and panelists on how they started, their highs and lows, and journeys thus far. I'm your host. I'm, as Laura said, head of development at BBC Comedy. And we have our esteemed panel of writers, David Hancock, Helen Black, Ameir Brown, and Louis Paxton. If each of you could give us a quick snapshot of yourselves, your current role, and the shows that you're currently working on as a writer. Ameir Brown, can we go to you next?
Yep. Hi, all. I'm Ameir Brown. I'm a screenwriter from Birmingham, and I'm currently working on a number of television and film projects. The project that's currently top of the pile is one I'm a staff writer on in Stephen Knight's Disney Plus Victorian boxing drama, quite a mouthful, called A Thousand Blows, which is currently shooting at the moment in London. In the past, I've been in writers' rooms for BBC One's The Capture, wrote 2 episodes recently on a broadcast show called Champion, which is also on BBC One. And I've also written an episode on the soon to be broadcast police thriller Criminal Record, which will go on Apple TV plus soonish. So I've been kept quite busy over the last few years, and that's me.
Nice. Thanks, Ameir. We're going to throw to you, Helen.
I have written 11 novels, and then in TV, I moved into TV about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe. I've written on Clink, Grantchester, Death in Paradise, and the new Sophie Turner show, Joan. And then most recently, I've co-written season 2 of Time with Jimmy McGovern. That's in post. That'll be out in this autumn. And then I'm currently writing my own 6-parter, which will be shot next February.
Amazing. Thank you, Helen. And then Louis.
So I'm a writer and director. I'm currently directing a block of the second series of Wreck, which is a BBC Three kind of comedy horror. Prior to that, I directed Shetland, some of Shetland, the police drama, and my first sort of break as a director was a comedy pilot, Lady Baby, which was a BBC Three and a BBC Scotland pilot for Kirsty Swain. I came up as a sort of comedy short filmmaker and studied as a director, but then found myself after graduating just very hard to get work. So I started writing and became more of a writer. And it's really only over the last few years I've started directing for television. So now I'm kind of in a position where I'm trying to bring the two together for my own projects as a writer and a director.
Thanks, Louis. Also, if anyone has time, I would really urge you to watch Neville is Dead, which is one of Louis' shorts, and it is so funny and heartwarming, and I think Googleable. You can Google it.
Yeah,
right?
you can get it online.
It's on the internet. Yeah. So let's jump into the questions. I think it's fair to say there's no right or wrong path to becoming a screenwriter. But I think it's fair to say it's like really daunting and it can be a really intimidating business when you're starting out. David and Helen, can you give us an insight into how you got your first gigs? Can we start with you, Helen?
How I got my first gig. I had written a lot of novels and not even really thought much about television. So my novels have been optioned by Prodcos, but not with me to write them. And then I don't know, I just thought, why not? And I just wrote a script, and then there was a competition, BBC Writers' Room, in connection with Kudos, production company Kudos. So I sort of sent in this script to there, and it won. And Laura at Kudos said to me during the final interview, whether you win or not, get yourself an agent. Get your book agent's not good enough. You need a proper TV agent. And so I just wrote to a load of agents. Unfortunately, got representation. And then she sorted out a lot of generals for me to go to. And once you start going out to generals, then people start asking you to pitch ideas that they might option, or they might one producer just gave me an episode of Clink out of the blue. And so you just start working from there, and each job then builds to another job until you've sort of finally got what they call very grandly a slate, which always seems to me like basically a list of what you're doing. But your slate.
There's a good question about development later, which I'm very excited to get into. So we're talk about that. So we went both Louis and Ameir, you both had some form of formal training. Like Lou, you went to film school, and Ameir, you studied screenwriting. Did you think that experience helped at all, or did you learn more on the job, or were you like, I could have skipped that entire period? I'm gonna start with you, Louis, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So I did a BA in Glasgow. What was the RSAMD is now the Conservatoire. It was like a general kind of film course. It was 2 years, and that was great. You know, because they had the access to the kit. You know, we didn't have kit. It was quite expensive, and so they gave you a little bit of a budget to make your grad film with as well. So, you know, having no money and wanting to make films, but also just having the access to crew in your fellow course mates, and you know, development support as well. I remember we had a really good screenwriting tutor who kind of helped us, but we all kind of had to write and direct, and then we were selected maybe 4 or 5 projects to make. So I got to make a grad film there, and that grad film got me into my next course, which was directing fiction at the NFTS. So I went kind of straight onto that, and that was an MA, and that was in London, and that was a big expense at that time, and I understand it's probably even more now. I received partial kind of support through the Donald Dewar Trust, which made it possible for me, and I took out a career development loan. But the reason I'm talking about money as much as that was probably the biggest hurdle at that time, was just affording it and going to film school. And I did spend, after graduating, about 5 years paying off the debts that I'd built up. That said, what I learned at film school was invaluable, and especially the directing course it's a fantastic course, and there was it was well worth it. I think it was the rigorous crits that you have for your films, and the development on your scripts is it was just so important to kind of go through that. I graduated in 2013, so I don't know. I'm not sure now what that, it might be a very different kind of situation, but I didn't necessarily, I would say I didn't graduate and go straight into work. I did get an agent off the back of it, which was great, off my grad film from the NFTS. But I wasn't working immediately, which is kind of why I started writing, because it was something I could do. I think I learned a lot from it, but I didn't necessarily go into employment directly afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you made friends for life, probably too. You meet cool people.
Yeah, I did, and collaborators as well. And it was great from that point of view. And also just, being from Scotland and living in London at that time, it really was a kind of springboard into the industry, and introduced me to people, which was great. I really needed that, I think. So yeah, there was a lot of positives about it.
Nice. And then Ameir,
So
how is that?
I followed a similar route to Louis. I did an undergrad in filmmaking, but then I went to London Film School to do an MA in screenwriting as well. And I think honestly, it's more what you want to get out of the course. I didn't go to the film school to learn how to write per se. It did improve certain aspects, and I wasn't going in there green. And I wouldn't recommend anyone do that, because I don't find that the course or the overall environment to be fit for a beginner. Film school is a good place to learn, good place to grow as a writer, be in an environment for however long the course is, where you're around like-minded individuals writing or thinking about writing every day. And I guess this helped me in creative areas such as ideas generating, looking critically over other people's ideas. And it helps to think about ways to get into the industry, whether through playwriting or radio scripts. It really helps to be flexible. But I think I've definitely learned more on the job, being in writers' rooms, observing how more experienced and crucially currently working writers work and their process. But also being on set, seeing productions, speaking with producers, and learning more about behind the scenes. It's kind of like an apprenticeship, I guess, where actually being in the role and getting the education is key to setting up for the future. But overall, I'd say that going to film school is a very personal decision. I wouldn't say you absolutely need it, but for someone outside of maybe the London-centric bubble, for example, that is the film and TV industry in this country, it can definitely be helpful to go to film school, meet other individuals, get an idea of the industry, and see what's behind the curtain if you do want to do that.
Amazing. Thanks to me. Also, if anyone's a John York fan, I really recommend reading Into the Woods, which is only not very much money. You can buy it off the internet also. And yeah, it's a good book on screenwriting. So and Helen, you touched on this a bit, but one hurdle we often hear from new writers is getting an agent. And one question actually we got, which we can talk through a bit, is about what is a general. But yeah, often
a lot
hear
of people were asking that. What is a general?
yeah, what is a general?
Yeah, well, I know what a general is. General is just, and somebody as well said I was quite quiet, so I'll try and speak up. A general just means a general meeting. So basically, it's just a meeting between you and a producer. It's essentially, people get really worried about them. And I always say, it is just a chat over a cup of tea with someone else that likes television.
Yes.
Think of it that way. Don't imagine that you're pitching like an evangelist. Do you know what I mean? What you are doing is you're just going for a chat. You're just showing them who you are and the sort of things that you like watching and that you like writing. You'll get on way better if you treat generals that way.
And you get a free coffee out of it usually, which is
and you know, as also a lot of people do it by Zoom now, so you don't even have to be in London. I prefer to be in the room with somebody. I think it's better to make a connection with the producer in the room. But if you can't, you can't. You know, people are more than happy to Zoom.
yes, people love a Zoom. But yeah, if you can do an in-person general, I think I agree, those are better. But yeah, one hurdle we often hear from new writers is getting an agent. Ameir and David, can you talk through how that happened for you, and what would your recommendation be to others who are also looking to be repped, and like how do you, I guess, stand out when the competition is just so high? Ameir, can we start with you?
Yeah, first thing I'd say to any new writer looking to get an agent is that it isn't something you should absolutely rush or have needling away and stressing you. I do get it because I was there, especially coming out of film school. You want to get an agent because you want to they can open doors to you and get you work and get you seen. And you think you need one immediately when that's not necessarily the case. As a new writer, the main thing I think you should focus on is your work, getting scripts in a great place. And I say scripts in plural because you need at least two, maybe a few more ideas for an agent to think, yes, I should champion this individual. If the work is good, agents will come. That's always my mantra. What you don't want to do is sign with someone because you're not ready and just sit there on their clients list, just gathering dust because you've not got anything worthy of them, you know, alerting producers or putting you forward for jobs. Even with an agent, you still need to be self-starting, self-motivating, putting in the work, looking out for opportunities because they aren't really there to hold your hand. You don't get to, you don't get to take your foot off the pedal essentially when you're with them. And that same hunger you've got when you want to find them, you need to keep it because they're usually always looking out for new talent as well. So as long as your work's getting in the right places, i.e. on a producer's desk or placing well in competitions or even getting seen on stage or in a short film circuit, you'll have eyes on you. And my way of getting in was that a producer sent my work to an agent looking to get one of her clients as a director on my work. The agent took a look, liked the script and said, has he got an agent? The producer said no. And that's literally how I got my agent then. But this was months after I'd, got into the industry, about 8 to 9 months after. And, when I was going through that, I was thinking, why doesn't anyone want me? Why haven't I been signed yet? But I wasn't really meeting any agents that were really, we weren't in the same spot, in terms of my ambition or their ambition, for example. So when I met this new agent who, I'm still with right now, it was a really, we just clicked straight away. And that was who I knew would be championing my work. So you just need to be ready when they come knocking, to be honest, because they need to know that they have someone ready for the general meetings and requests for writers' rooms when they hit their desk. So, that's my advice. Don't stress over it, but just be ready when they're ready for you.
That's a good point. So we talk about development process, basically the bit that you do before you write a script. Helen and Louis, can you tell us about how you find development? Because it can be really painful and long, and then it often ends in someone saying, no, I'm not going to make the thing that you spent ages developing. Helen, can you talk about kind of how you find development?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say about development is you will do a lot of it. You should be doing a lot of it because I think Jed Mercurio said he still gets only 1 out of every 10 shows that he pitches away. And that's Jed. So the rest of us are probably going to have to do 2 or 3 times that to try and get stuff away. So you end up doing a lot of projects that are never, ever going to be in production. And that's kind of heartbreaking. So what you have to do is try and forget about that and just treat each project like it's going to be on fucking BBC One on Sunday night. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the project that everybody's going to watch. because if you don't do that, A, you won't do a good job, and B, you just won't enjoy it. You know, if you start thinking, oh well, no one's going to pick this up. But yeah, it's hard because here you are, you've got an idea. Either the producer has brought it to you, and you're developing it together, or you've brought it to your producer, or there's some middle ground where you've got this idea and you think it's going to be a great TV show, and then you start development, and and basically it just feels like the world and his wife at the production company have got something to say about it. So this document goes, which often isn't a script, by the way. Oh my God, we dream that development involves a script. Quite often it involves a treatment, which is basically a way for them to pay you fuck all to write about 5 pages. I call it a pitch document, basically. What you're doing is it's a document to pitch to the broadcasters in the hope that they will pay for a script. And this document goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until in the end you can't remember what the TV show was that you were trying to pitch. So the good thing about it is by the time you send it into the broadcasters, fewer fucks could you give anymore whether this gets a commission. And you've also, with any luck, picked up several. I mean, I'm joking, but it is like that. I mean, I don't know. I was can see the writers laughing, but oh my days, development. And there are people at the production companies whose job is solely to do that. They call themselves a producer. They don't produce anything. They just do development. And it is literally their job to send this document back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until eventually one of you gives up and you send it in, or the option's just about to run out and they have to send it in to the broadcasters. Yeah, so that's probably not the answer people want to hear, but it's as truthful as I can be.
Yes, no, I think that sounds like quite accurate. I don't see the back and forth. I just see the final treatment, and yeah, it's heavy. It can be heavy. Louis, how do you find it?
I think it depends. I think a lot of that I've experienced as well. I think also, I guess for me, it's dependent on who I'm working with as a producer and as development producers as well, and development assistants at companies. I think if you're working with people you really get on with and you all see you have the same project in mind, and there's not a lot of kind of clash or conflict there, it can just be a really lovely, painless, kind of quite quick process sometimes. I think I really enjoy development. I love development. I really, I think I'm sure all writers do, but I really do thrive on other people's kind of feedback, and I like to collaborate. I think it's the majority of the work I've done, the paid work as a writer, has been development. I've not actually had a greenlit show, or worked on a greenlit show, but I did earn a living, weirdly, writing, doing through options and through script commissions for years. So, it's a really valid kind of part of being a writer and earning a living. I've written a lot of stuff on spec, and I think, each time it does feel like it's getting a little closer. But I think if I hadn't gone through all those development processes, my work just wouldn't be as good generally. And even if you do have projects that get to a certain point and don't go any further, you often, I anyway, often take things from those projects and find, other opportunities for them in other projects. Or I've even had projects that, have died for a couple of years and then come back, and then, you get another option fee, and then, they start the rounds with new commissioners and things. So nothing's ever really wasted. Certainly, it's all really valuable time, I think.
Great, thank you both. As well as having your own projects, David, you started writing on big shows like The Crown, like you mentioned, and Ameir, like you mentioned recently on Stephen Knight's A Thousand Blows. How did these opportunities come around for you, and how do you find working on someone else's vision versus your own authored piece?
Yeah, so Stephen Knight doesn't usually do a writer's room. As you may know from Peaky Blinders, he wrote basically every episode himself. So A Thousand Blows is one of the first shows he's done, at least recently, where he's invited a writer's room. And, it's been really, I've learned a lot on the process, learning from Stephen's process and how he writes. And, how, he generates ideas is really, really helpful. And also seeing how he runs a writer's room, how he runs a show is helpful for myself, who has ambitions to run my own shows, hopefully very soon. But that came about when I believe a producer from another show was hired onto this show, and then they brought me over with them because they were considering me for that previous show. And then they put my name forward and said, "Have you considered this guy? He's Jamaican as your two of the main characters in A Thousand Blows are Jamaican heritage. So they were like, maybe you can, help with this, but also the boxing side of things." And yeah, I went forward at an interview. You always have to do an interview with the producers and maybe the show creator. In this case, it was just the producers because Stephen was too busy. But interview with them. If you impress them, then you'll get the job. And I got that same day. But yeah, like I said, writing from someone else's vision is really helpful to learn your craft and learn how to essentially, function the writer's room, function in a space where something's getting made. I think what's important is, as you mentioned before, development can be really hard. I think we've all been through development and hoping something gets made. But actually working on a show that's getting made, is being greenlit, the budget's there, you're writing for a budget now, and you see exactly how that works out. That teaches you a whole lot of important things going forward in your own career. So yeah, we've got 2 season order on the show. So I've written on the first season that's been shot. We're currently writing the second season to go into shooting very soon. So that as well, just being able to work on something being made, as I said, is really helpful. And for someone like Stephen Knight, it's great to learn.
Yeah. I bet. I mean, that must have been kind of is that like a dream come true kind of situation for you?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I hadn't watched Peaky Blinders before I met him, but then I went ahead and watched it after meeting him and working on the show. And I was like, yeah, this guy's really talented. So yeah.
I embarrassingly haven't seen it yet, but I need to. I need to. So as someone me works in comedy, it'd be totally remiss if I didn't ask a comedy question. So Louis, as someone like you who's mainly worked in comedy, but also a bit of drama with Rec. Can you talk through like any of the like? And I know I feel like even your comedy work has a bit of like a drama through line through it, and can be like on the plottier side. But you talk through like the differences. Is one easier than the other? I mean, people famously say comedy is hard, but do you think do you think that's true?
Yeah, but I would say that. So because I do it. So I definitely, but I do think it's hard. I think, but maybe it's hard to make good comedy, and I'm not saying I do, but I'm just saying it's like I've made a lot of comedy that isn't that funny. So I think there's also when you make something that is really funny, it's really really rewarding, and and it is hard. It's really hard, and I think you have to surround yourself with people who are very funny as well. Like really funny performers and editors and just people who get it. But that said, drama has its own challenges. I would say like when I write, I tend to write comedy, but I always mix genres. So I've written horror comedies and I've written a lot of comedy drama. A lot of my early treatments don't read like comedies; they read like dramatic. So like these pitch documents we're talking about treatments, they could be dramas. Because a lot of the comedy I write comes from I guess more in the dialogue and in the characters, and it's not necessarily big kind of set piece gags. So I do. And all of the reading I've done and a lot of what I watch as well is drama, so that informs the way I work. I don't know, I've not really written a straight sitcom, so I think that's an entirely different kind of beast in its own way. But I think writing continuously sort of successful comedy is incredibly difficult, and I guess it's also why a lot of people work in partnerships and in teams, and why the Americans are so good at it as well, because they have these massive writing teams that can just continuously kind of generate content. And there's something about comedy where you really are just chipping away at it right up to the last second, right up to you're rewriting on set. You're constantly just striving for a better laugh, and that's quite different from drama. In my experience of directing comedy to directing drama, directing comedy, it feels you're working right up to the wire, whereas drama, you do a lot of that work up front, and by the time you get on set, in my experience anyway, there's not a huge amount of play that goes on. It's more about realizing what's on the page.
Yeah, that makes sense. Helen, you should totally get into comedy. Have you ever thought about comedy?
Well, do you know what? I'm a steely pragmatist, and I always think the comedy slots are this and the drama slots are this. So what I always pitch is drama, but it's going to make you laugh.
Yeah.
It's true. You're desperate for a laugh when you watch a drama, but also you're right. There's no money in drama.
So
Comedy,
yeah,
the lesson is there's more money in drama. By the way, everyone. Sorry.
And I, you know, I'm not a performer. I'm not a writer performer. So being a silly pragmatist, I've stuck with drama, and I never call it comedy drama because that always leaves the commissioners going, is it mine? So I just always solid drama. And the show I've just got away, I think it's quite funny. It's not a comedy. But I think that you will laugh. You're not going to laugh too much. But I think actually Jimmy's really funny. People think Jimmy's really bleak. He's not. He's a really funny dude. And together, this will surprise people. Talking a little bit about writers' rooms, because Jimmy and I sat in a room together for a long time. We laughed a lot, but ultimately it's a very serious drama about prison. But we've snuck in a few gags along the way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you got it.
Nobody wants to watch black, bleak, you know? So
I was watching Happy Valley and it's so bleak, and there's so many good jokes. There's so many good jokes in Happy Valley. Did you see any jokes?
When you read Sally's scripts, they are laugh out loud funny. Sometimes it doesn't always quite translate in the edit because the edits are so choppy these days, you know, and that you don't. So you don't get that delivery that you do in comedy. But honestly, her actual writing and Sally herself is very funny. So, yeah, I like a good. I don't think I could write a proper comedy though, because like Louis do, because they have to be really funny or they don't work. Whereas with drama, you can hit and miss, and if you get a laugh, it's an extra bonus, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It takes the pressure off in drama. So we're gonna move on to feedback and notes, which is my favorite part of the process. But I get to give notes, which is the best, but you have to receive them, which is the worst. But I'm just curious as to how in your career you learned to take notes constructively rather than personally. Was that an art form? And also there's a follow-up question, which I'll ask later. But I'll ask now. What kind of notes do you think writers should listen to versus avoid? Which is a controversial and spicy question. But anyways, the first part is, how did you learn to kind of take notes, not personally, I guess? I'm going to start with you, Ameir, if that's okay.
Interesting question. You have to learn not to be precious about your idea, firstly, and learn very quickly that writing for TV and film is very collaborative. So you're going to get notes from not just the producer, you're going to get notes from the studio, this person here, that person there. It's like the actors, even when it comes to shooting, the actors have notes because they want their character to do this or say this. And it just becomes a process where you just learn that this isn't a comment on your talent as a writer. It's more, how do we service the show? And that's, in terms of how to take it, I mean, it's up to you, literally. Just learn it's not personal. That's my advice to any young writer, because I know that there's a lot of people out there who think, their script is great and this doesn't need to change. Well, when it comes to production or when it comes to this and that, people are going to have ideas, and maybe you've overlooked something that you can't see because you've been looking at the script for so long. And as for the bullet point question about what you should ignore, there's a very common quote, and I think every writer's heard it, about the note behind the note. So even when a producer sends you a note, that's not specifically them telling you you have to do this. It can be your interpretation, or, there's a lot of times I go back on notes and I'm like, I don't agree with this and I'd rather do it this way. And they'll be like, okay, that's fine. It's just a case of learning what you can push back on or what you can interpret. And, that's how you have a good script going forward. Just learn to take the note and, interpret it your own way.
Yeah, it can be really tempting to just provide the writer with the solution, which I try not to do.
Yeah.
But because that's your job. But sometimes you're just kind of like, oh, I read this situation as this. Is that what you meant? And that can be kind of more helpful, I heard. Helen, can I ask you, what notes do you think writers should ignore? And then which notes do you think they should pay attention to?
Okay, so production notes you have to pay attention to. If you're in production and somebody rings you up and says, this happened to me, I wrote a film called Life and Death in the Warehouse, and a lot of scenes were set on a fire escape, and we'd seen the location and blah blah. The very first day of filming, I got a call. Well, the day before filming, I got a call from the producer saying, the owner of the location has set up a Christmas market outside, so we need to get rid of that for a start. I know you just can't, but you just filming's mental. And then the next day she rang me and she said about the fire escape, and I said, yeah. She said, it's not safe. Okay, so now I have to write those scenes elsewhere. So the director is going with his phone round the location for me, because it's in Swansea, to find me somewhere. Basically saying to me, what is it you want? And I'm saying, I want isolation from the rest of the I just need a space where she can take a call. He finds me, we just rewrite it. You have to take those notes. You can't sit there and go, but I want a fire escape. No, filming is going, it's a juggernaut. You must find the solution. And I love production. I love being in production. I love production notes. They're so mental. And they feel like a creative puzzle that you have to solve like that. There's no time like that. I fucking love that. What I don't like are the notes in development, you're going to guess, where somebody goes, oh, basically the night before they've watched something on telly and they go, oh, so I watched How to Make a Murderer. And you're going, yeah, but it's set in 1987 in Doncaster. Or notes that are just absolutely bonkers. I once wrote a very delicate piece about a foster girl falling in love with the biological brother in the house, and it was about the care system. And the note, and he was grieving for his dead father. So it was, and the note came, could the dad be still alive in the cellar? Now, I think David makes a fair point there, which was there's a world a year before when I'd have gone, yes, I think he probably could. But in fact, on this occasion, I went, are you fucking shitting me? And suffice to say, that relationship with that particular producer broke down. But like, there does come a point when you have to hold on to what the project is like. And either you do have a conversation with your producer that's very open and you can say, are you shitting me? And they laugh and you move forward together. Or you have a relationship where there's no laughter comes back and then you just go like, oh, we're not on the same page now. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often. But you don't have to take every note. I mean, it's only somebody's opinion. I think what you have to do is at least give it house room, as my mum would say. Like, you have to consider it. Like, is there a world in which the dad could be alive in the cellar? No. But there are other notes that seem bonkers, but actually, when you think about them, you think, oh, you've got a point, actually. You have got a point here. And so then, but I tend to do most of them because everybody only wants the thing to be better, right? Mm-hmm. I think probably what that note was, this is not exciting enough.
Right.
But there's no getting away from that when you're pitching not a particularly exciting, as in action, thrillery. That's not what they bought. You know what I mean? Like, you bought it. Why? Why? They just get to a point sometimes, other than notes, where you really want to say, like, why did you buy this? I don't get it. If you want it to be, How to Make a Murderer. Yeah, I'm pragmatic, I think, about most notes, particularly when you are moving towards production, because speed, money, getting the thing on, getting the shit on the road. You know what I mean? That's the difference between being in development and being in production, isn't it? It's exactly like Ameir says. It's like it's just a different beast, isn't it?
Yes. And it also touches on the point that I think, Ameir, you made about agents, like someone understanding your vision. I think when you find, it can be tempting, especially early on in your career, just working with any producer who will take your project on. But I think it's just as important to use that opportunity to get to know who the producer is and why they're interested in you, and whether they get the show that you want to make and the show that you're pitching. Because if you just pick whoever because you're like, oh, they chose me, and then you end up on this road where you're like, oh God, this person does not get me. Like, you should use those generals with producers in the same way, where you're like getting to know them and their tastes and what they like about you and your work, and really interrogate those generals rather than feeling just lucky to be on them, I think. So next question, there are a lot of schemes and competitions that, broadcasters are creating a lot of opportunities, like BBC Comedy. We do a lot of great schemes for new writers trying to get into the industry. Louis and Helen, are there any of these that have helped you in your career? Were they useful? I'm going to throw to you, Louis, first, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. I think BAFTA Rockcliffe was a massive opportunity for me. It was the first thing I'd written for TV. I'd written short film scripts that I'd directed, and I'd co-written with other people, but I'd never actually written a pilot episode before. So I wrote a pilot for a sci-fi comedy, and it was selected. And off the back of that, I don't know if anyone knows anything about BAFTA Rockcliffe, but it's kind of a forum where they will read excerpts from the script, and they invite people from the industry, and they do it in London at the BAFTA. In the BAFTA building, and it's in a big auditorium, and so you get a real exposure that you wouldn't necessarily have. I was lucky enough to already be represented because I'd graduated and got representation, on the back of my graduation film. This was maybe 2 years later. The other writers weren't represented, and I know both of them were picked up. So it's another place where you can kind of find that exposure. I also think they maybe do something now where they give feedback on all the scripts as well. So, it's not necessary. You don't have to get selected to benefit from it. And I know other people who've, not been selected, but had their scripts passed on to people and things like that. So it's just those kind of opportunities are great. I know there's also script competitions. I know people who've got, had opportunities out of winning or being shortlisted for script competitions, like Shortcom is a very good one. That's a comedy one. And then the BBC have loads of opportunities as well. I completed my first writing and directing gig where I brought the two together was last year, was Calamity James, which was a short film project for the new comedy shorts BBC comedy scheme, and that gave me that was another massive opportunity for me, and it has it's a chance to have my writing and my directing available for people to watch through a funded broadcaster. It was just it was excellent. And off the back of that, we have a series in development, and other opportunities have come. So these schemes are so valuable. I think particularly writing it was BAFTA Rockcliffe was a massive one for me, though. That was huge. And I know, Ameir, did you do BAFTA Rockcliffe as well?
I also got into the industry via BAFTA Rockcliffe as well. 2018, so a year after I left film school. No, 2019, sorry. Year after I left film school. And again, I found very helpful. It did also help those who may not have been in the top three, and they were able to attend the scripts being shown and meet people in the show and after. So again, like you said, it's a really, really helpful forum, and I guess they're going to get a lot of applications this year.
Yeah.
What about you, Helen? Were there any schemes or?
Yeah. Like I said at the beginning, I applied to a scheme, like a competition via the BBC Writers' Room, and I recommend everybody, if they're free, apply. What's the worst? I mean, I'm not sure about these ones that charge hundreds of quid. Like, what's the deal there? But if it's free, apply. The worst that can happen is they just put the script in the bin. Do you know what I mean? They're not going to remember next year. It's going to be a different set of readers. Don't worry, you've been rejected. When people go, oh, don't send in something crap because they'll remember. No, they won't.
And also BBC Comedy, we do the Comedy Collective, which we just launched last year for writers, directors, and producers, and it's very good, I think. Yeah, it's good. And then Ameir and Helen, your first screenwriting projects, I think it's fair to say, are quite personal and authored. How did you make sure you didn't get pigeonholed based on kind of into writing specifically about, where you come from and your personal identities? And in your opinion, what's the best way to kind of work with that and against that? I'm going to start with you, Ameir, if that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, the first script I wrote that got me into the industry was a comedy one, kind of semi-autobiographical, based on my life as a guy from Birmingham moving to London. And the first thing I did when I got a general meeting was go into the room and I'd say, I'm not a comedy writer. Then I'd pitch something completely different. So then they'd get to know that there's different sides to me instantly. Like, I'm only interested kind of in writing this kind of comedy, but this is also what I can do. This script I've got here, this idea I've got here. And I think just writing other ideas as well, because even when you get your agent, And if you've got a raft of different ideas, different genres, different kinds of, TV, film, that kind of thing, they'll know then that they've got someone that can be adaptable and go to different writers' rooms or meet different kinds of producers to talk about work. And that's how I just think not to pigeonhole yourself. I'm trying to speed up so I don't go over time. But even the work you choose to do, like myself, I've done 3 shows now, all 3 very different genres, and that's kind of a way to show that I'm not going to be pigeonholed into one. And if even Champions just come out, that's the musical drama. I've had a few producers reach out with, does he want to write this about music and a rap? And I'm like, no, I want to do something different. So it's like, that's the kind of way to stand out and not get yourself pigeonholed. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of how I've gone about it. And so far it's been successful, but curious to see what other people think.
Yeah. Helen, has it been similar for you?
Yeah, my first piece was about a young girl growing up in care, a very authored piece, actually. And weirdly, 4 years later, it's just been taken into development by the BBC. How weird is that? I know. But yeah, I mean, I tend to write a lot about class, a lot about legal system, care system. I don't mind too much. Funnily enough, the show that I've just got away with my own is not like that at all. But I suppose time sits in that area as well. I don't mind using my expertise, but like I don't like it if people assume that's all I could do. I'd like to do other things as well.
Yes, variety is the spice of life, they say.
Yeah.
So okay, we have 2 minutes left, and a really important part of, I think we talked about this a bit in the development bit, but is rejection. So people, I guess, rejection in terms of pursuing a career as a writer, really, rather than like specific ideas. Sorry. And because it, like we said, it is daunting and it's a really intimidating business, and sometimes it can feel like it's just who you know and that's how you get in. So yeah, it'd be really helpful if everyone could go around and just tell me kind of how have you dealt with kind of this idea of rejection, that you can't pursue maybe a career as like a working writer. Could we start with you, Louis?
Yeah, I think I just rely on the people around me. I rely on my family and my friends. My family have been very supportive of me doing this as a career, and I know I'm very lucky to have that support. That wasn't necessarily financial support. It was just my parents being like, "This is not a crazy idea. Go and do it." That means a lot. That's a huge support, especially when you're living in their spare room for years on end. I think more recently, I just rely on my peers. I have writers who are, people I've grown up with, people I've worked with, directors, just a community of people, and we share experience and we share notes and we share, when it's hard, we talk about how hard it is, and when it's good, we talk about how good it is. And I think that makes it less lonely and makes it a lot easier to deal with rejection, certainly, because when you realize that everyone's going through it, then it's not nearly as hard.
Ameir, how have you kind of overcome?
Rejection hurts a lot at the start of your career because it's kind of the idea that you're going out with is the only one you've got. When you get a few years in and you've got so much going on, it hurts a lot less because you kind of look at it as, okay, I haven't got time for that right now anyway. So that's the kind of how I look at it. It's probably a lot of copium. And I'm just trying to rationalize it, but it obviously still hurts to get rejected. But when it's not the only thing you're working on, it hurts a lot less. That's essentially what I'm trying to say. And you can always circle back because I don't think rejection is the end of any idea. There's a lot of ideas get picked up years later and stuff. So it's never the end. You can always revive it, change it up, bring it somewhere else. So look at it like that. And at the same time, if you're lucky enough to have 3, 4 of the things you're working on, then you're blessed and you can just keep going, and this rejection won't hurt as much.
Great. And then Helen, how have you found it?
I hate it. I know everybody thinks I'm dead loud and dead hard, but I absolutely hate rejection. Honestly, I cry. And I just think, well, of course I cry. I love this project. I fucking love it. And I really hate it when producers act like it doesn't matter. And we just roll again tomorrow, Helen. I'm like, no, we're rolling again tomorrow. Of course you roll again tomorrow. But today I just want to sob. Do you know what I'm saying? That was the best idea ever. And Nicola Walker was attached. Yeah, no, I find it really hard, and I'm not macho about it at all. No, I'm sobbing queen, telling everybody, woe is me. But it's like Ameir says, but ultimately, if you've got 15 other projects on the go, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You feel your feelings basically is the
Yeah.
so thanks for the panel, everybody. I think it was really good, and there are lots of really good questions, and I hope it was useful. But now it's time for us to close, sadly, and I'm getting kicked out of this room. Someone's knocking at the door, which is unfortunate. But yeah, thank you to our panel, David, Ameir, Helen, and Louie, and I hope this is useful. And I think it's going to be on the RTS YouTube, so you can rewatch it until oblivion, which is, I think, great. Thanks, everybody.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.